Time now to spotlight the latest within the cryptocurrency space. Joining us now for Insight is Andy Baehr, head of product at CoinDesk Indices. Andy, thank you so much for joining us.
Great to be here.
I always love to see you and sit down with you to discuss the latest and greatest happening in crypto. Let's talk a little bit about Bitcoin, the leader in the space of cryptocurrency. It's gaining a little bit of ground today. It's so funny. We often talk recently about this grind higher in stocks, but Bitcoin's been leading that grind higher with riskier assets, but it doesn't trade as volatile as it used to. When you think about that, is that just kind of where it is in its maturation cycle?
No, it's kind of weird, without catalyst. By the way, if you've heard latest and greatest on Bitcoin, please let me know, because there just hasn't been any. And now we've been in a 10% range for the last month, for the last 30 days. That's getting more and more characteristic, right? We saw this up here near the all-time highs, actually during the depth of the tariff tantrum down in the 80 to 85,000 or 88,000 range. We saw the same thing. So Bitcoin tends to wait for a catalyst, move into a new range. Its new behavior is just to sit there. And even though we've seen news from Strategy buying more Bitcoin and inflows into ETFs and supportive economic news, it's just kind of hunkered down here. Volatility is much lower than it was last year, and that's partly due to institutional adoption, but that's the new pattern. The big question is, as we head into summer, what's coming next?
Well, that's what I was going to ask. So in summer, often, with riskier assets, it's just a slower cycle.
Yep.
Do you expect to see that pattern, just very little in terms of on the fireworks front for crypto in the summer?
Totally. The last two summers have been sideways summers. 2 years ago, we had regulatory concerns about the ETFs, which was, of course, successful. Last year, we had concerns about the U.S. election, which, from crypto's point of view, was successful. But the summers were long and they were hard. And we would come on programs like this and, talk about the weather. Now it's looking a little bit similarly. Remember, Bitcoin likes the idea of, higher inflation and lower interest rates. So it depends on which way these economic numbers come out, inflation numbers, employment numbers, if we're going to get there. Right now, we don't see a lot of strong catalysts, nor a lot of options activity, which are going to yank Bitcoin out of this range. So the good news would be we take a leap higher based on confidence and adoption momentum. The bad case would be that there's just kind of a slump and a lack of support, and we drift lower from here.
Speaking of adoption momentum beyond just Bitcoin, let's talk a little bit about the stablecoin space. We had that big Circle IPO last week. I mean, it was huge down here on the stock exchange floor, on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange. For someone who thinks of stablecoin as just digital dollars, what did that IPO mean, and what does how much should investors care about stablecoin?
I was on the floor here doing another program, and I got very emotional about that. It was a big moment for blockchain. That and the Genius Act making its way through the legislature really means that the government and the markets are supportive of having public blockchain stablecoins. That's important. There's $250 billion of them now. People are expecting that could 10x in the next couple of years. So from the point of view of crypto investors, all of those stablecoins, they need a blockchain to settle on. They're not their own blockchains. Right. They're going to have to settle on Ethereum or Solana or Tron or Sui or something else. So it is, for those who have been saying, what is blockchain used for? This is going to be a multi-trillion-dollar example of high-frequency transactions. That's great. The other thing that a lot of people are talking about, I happen to agree really strongly with this, is if we get many trillions of stable coins, that's many trillions of U.S. Treasury-backed assets, which means the U.S. government has a new customer for U.S. debt. U.S. debt's become sort of a chess piece in the global trade wars. Hey, a new multi-trillion-dollar customer is one of the best things that could happen to the U.S. government.
I'm curious to know your views on the progress with regard to the Genius Act. It's making its way through Congress. Are you worried about are there any risks that worry you with regard to the Genius Act? And what do you care most about?
I think getting it passed in this time when there is an aligned legislature and when there seems to be alignment towards getting it passed. Of course, anything could happen last minute to derail, which would, in my limited reading on this, be primarily politically motivated. Getting it through gets blockchain legislation done and sets up for the next one. But in the meantime, this idea that payments can be revolutionized, that blockchain use in the United States can be open for business, right? And that we have this potential multi-trillion-dollar user of U.S. debt come online, and then the government can move on to what else can we do about markets to help blockchain companies feel good raising capital, operating, and launching public tokens into the space.
Raising capital, are they raising capital though in dollars? I mean,
it's a good
you
question.
Have to ask that question.
No, that's great. I love it because now conventional companies are maintaining capital in Bitcoin. There's dozens now of blockchain, of Bitcoin, and other digital asset companies that are using their treasuries in that way. And then of course you have blockchain companies which might raise. They can raise in native tokens. They can raise in dollars. What they want to be able to do is raise money without any surprise emails from regulators. They want to operate in a way where they understand the rules and be able to raise capital, operate, and then list these tokens in such a way that people can trade them or invest in them.
Okay, and with all the buzz that we have around the regulatory climate and stablecoin, Bitcoin is still, what people think of when they think of cryptocurrency.
Yep.
When will altcoins catch up?
It's I have to say we've all had to be very patient with that. Bitcoin still leads rallies. Ethereum looked like it was knocking on death's door until suddenly it had a 50% rally in April. What we like to say is we don't know which and we don't know when. You really kind of need to own the market.
Okay.
You need to believe that blockchain technology and applications will come to change the way we do things, and that these very ambitious and well-designed platforms will rise to the top and do that. It's been a long wait. Can't disagree with that. Bitcoin's led the way. So for people who want to allocate across a portfolio, Bitcoin's a great store of value. The others are growth assets, and the good news is you're sort of not getting in too late.
So when you say own the market, when we're talking about equities, when one says own the market, they're usually talking about the S&P 500. What does that mean in the cryptocurrency space?
Yeah, we've had the CoinDesk 20 index live now for a year and a half. It's traded just over 15 billion in perpetual contracts around the world. So it's a very well-known benchmark in the space. It's very diversified. It actually limits the amount of Bitcoin. So if you have some Bitcoin already, you can have a CoinDesk 20 allocation. There are ETPs in Europe, and we hope very soon that there will be very, very easy to access investment products in the United States where people can get a market index that has a lot of diversification, and that's the best thing beyond Bitcoin.
And let me ask you just one quick 30-second final thought.
Sure.
There are some people in bullish crypto bulls, basically.
Bullish is our parent company, so I stood up when you said that.
And there are some calls for 200,000 Bitcoin by the end of the year. But I've even seen higher than that, like 300,000 plus. That feels very pie in the sky in the sense of, and I've told you before, I'm agnostic when it comes to this space. What do you think of that?
The return distribution of Bitcoin has a right tail, and we think that there's a limited number, never be more than 21 million Bitcoin. And now the institutional adoption is not only in ETFs and ETPs around the world, but in companies' treasuries that are unrelated. So that's spreading out. Bitcoin in particular is really going to face more and more scarcity versus demand. Now, does that turn from a very convex curve into something that's more linear? Potentially over time. But anybody who has underestimated Bitcoin's potential in the past has usually been surprised to the upside.
Fair.
So if you're happy with 50% or 100% and you wouldn't be disappointed with those kind of numbers, still makes sense.
That's fair. All right, Andy, thank you.
Nice to see you.
Appreciate it. Good to see you as usual. That's Andy Baehr, head of product at CoinDesk Indices. Our thanks to Andy.